Pikachu.
I swear I pressed the button. Did you switch to Pikachu? Did you switch to Pikachu?
Oh my gosh.
No, what is happening? We're
Welcome
running
into the Dad Verb podcast. Topics around parenting from the lens of a dad.
We're just sticking with it. We're actually going to keep that in
I got
there.
you.
This is the second time in a row where we've had like a mess up with the intro for this podcast, and I apologize because we are professionals. But
we're not. I intentionally interrupted him with Pikachu this time.
We're going to keep it in there because at the end of the day, people don't care and they just like our lo-fi vibe. Okay? That's what they're here for. Welcome in, guys.
Just here for the vibes.
They're just here for the tenor of our voices and the ASMR effect for 30 minutes. Yes.
Got a refreshing podcast episode related to fatherhood, but this one is a little different. We're going to be talking about schools. Okay. A lot of the guys who listen to this channel or who have tuned into the channel, listen to podcasts, they've got littles, they've got babies, they've got kids that are kind of below that 3-year-old range. But as we get older, the content is also going to get older, and Ben is looking for schools. So this is a little topic brought up by Ben. Private schools,
I need help
versus public. He needs help. We're trying to farm some engagement. I just want to open up this conversation because this is not something that I really looked into, but I am genuinely curious. There's monetary components here. Mm-hmm. There's time components. There's
religious components
potentially, right? There's setting up your kids for success. Is it actually providing that value? I don't know. There's some interesting ways that we can go down with this topic of like exploring private versus public, or rather than just outright like, no, our kids are just going to go to the school down the road, right? So let's open up that convo here. Ben, what was the catalyst for this? Why do you need help? What's going on in your life here?
Yeah, so gosh, man,
lay down on my couch and tell me what's wrong with you, Ben.
Right?
It's kind of crazy to think about this because I feel like, Andrew, when you and I first started talking, we were just about to have our first kid, like 2020. He's now 4. He's going to be 5 in August, which means where we live in the Carolinas, like he's going to be going to school next year. Mm-hmm. So we are getting to that point where if we want to send him anywhere other than our public school, our assigned public school, that we've got to get applications in and do interviews and go through admissions and all this other stuff. So
got to get on the waiting list.
I know. It's like doing daycare all over again. Mm-hmm. So for us, we are considering either one, our private school, which for us, there's a lot of factors. It's a good school, but it's actually, the way we're zoned is technically the school our son would go to is about 20 minutes in the opposite direction of the way I need to go to work. And because I've talked about this on the podcast before, my wife is a nurse. She leaves for work super early. So I do daycare drop off for both kids. They would be going to 2 separate schools, one 20 minutes that way, and then another 20 minutes this way back towards my office. Super just inconvenient. And they have to be there at like 7:30 in the morning. It's really, really early start time. Number 2, we live in South Carolina. The education system is all right. It's not bad. It's not great. From what I've heard, this elementary school is really good. But we just don't know much about it. And then lastly, for us, thinking through, to be quite honest, and I never really thought about this, but thinking through like safety and school size. Okay. So being a smaller school, being a private school with sort of its own on-campus security, not necessarily being a public school. As much as I think a part of it is, and the reason we started considering it is like, with our kids in daycare, we feel like we have some semblance of control, right? Like we can pull them out whenever we want to. We can go on vacations. It doesn't impact anything. When we move them, let's say we go to public school, we now have the same school schedule as everybody else, which means now vacations are sort of limited to summer break, winter break, peak seasons, right? So when you want to travel, you're going to be traveling in peak season with everybody else from the US because their kids are out of school too.
Yeah.
this private school has a year-round calendar. So they're on for, I think, like 5 or 6 weeks, and then they take 3 weeks off, but it's year-round.
Okay.
So your school calendar is drastically different than the public school calendar.
Right.
So it means when you want to take trips or travel, you are basically able to travel in off seasons. So added bonus. So we're just looking at it. There's a ton of factors. We're going to tour the school actually tomorrow morning to see what we think about it, understand the curriculum a little bit better, understand the overall cost.
Is it a religious school?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Episcopal, Catholic? No?
Yeah.
So it's a secular.
Yeah, it is a secular private school. We decided not to go, Christian Academy or anything like that.
Okay.
Just because it's not really for us.
So many questions.
Yeah. No, it's just a good question.
Okay. So when it comes to, I understand you're in South Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a state, I'm not sure, but when it comes to where you're particularly out at your school district.
Mm-hmm.
Because like here in Texas, right, there are many different like ISDs, right, independent school districts, right. You've got like Louisville and Frisco and Dallas and all that, and some are notoriously
Go
like
Allen
under.
Eagles.
Oh my God, Allen! Even you know about Allen, huh?
I know all about Allen.
They're right down the road. So some are notoriously like underfunded, and they're not very good, right? And there are a plethora of like, private schools where you can kind of go to instead and opt into that. Many do, while others are very well funded, and some of the classrooms are state of the art, all that stuff. Like, where do you feel like for you, where you're at, where do you feel like it would be, and do you feel like your kids would kind of get a leg up compared to other ISDs?
Yeah, I think we are. I haven't done a ton of research into it, which I really need to look more into just where these schools rank. I would say, being in the upstate of South Carolina, we are one of the. So the way our district is laid out is our county is sort of like this. They call the Panhandle, right? And the Panhandle of the county is where it's the seat of economic power in the county, right? So the most people live there. It drives the most revenue. We pay the highest taxes, and therefore they built the most schools for this area. It's just a very populous area because we happen to be just across the border from North Carolina. A lot of people get lower South Carolina taxes, but work in North Carolina. Sorry,
the girls are up.
Screaming
real life.
So where we're looking, we're kind of, I would say, middle ground. I think we're probably decently well funded, probably middle-ish of the pack, I would say, for educational standards. Maybe even higher up, because there are a lot of counties in South Carolina that have no funding, no money, and cannot upgrade their schools.
I got you. Okay, I'm okay.
Ability to.
Oh, sorry. Say it again, because you were cut off at the very beginning.
Let's say, does South Carolina or even the county you're in allow you to distribute your property tax to a school of your choice? So like when I was in Utah, you could if you lived like on one side of Salt Lake City, you could take your kids to the other side of Salt Lake City and be like, no, they're going to this high school, and they would be enrolled there, and the school would receive the portion
like
of
a
your
portion of
tax.
your tax.
Yeah. And in Iowa, they're doing something similar. I'll talk about it in a minute, but it makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't know if South Carolina's doing that.
I don't think we can. So we're in a really weird area, right? So the area we live in grew really quickly, and it's technically unincorporated. So my address is actually for a city that's about 25 miles away from me. It's about 20 to 25 minutes. So eventually they've been trying to incorporate for years. Like we don't technically have a post office for where I live. So that's why I can't have an address for the city I actually live in. I have an address for the county seat. And so to Andrew's question, where that becomes an issue is like, we have a ballot measure already this year for like almost $1 billion for school bonds. Now, how that gets distributed, because we're unincorporated, it directly impacts us, right? So we don't have as much of a say, even though we are the economic seat of the county, on where that money goes. Because we're unincorporated, we don't have a city council. We don't have people who are actually actively in these boards advocating for us. So some of it will go to the southern parts of the county, which again need upgrades, have probably been chronically underfunded. But we're also going to get another high school. Like they just built a several 100,000 square foot high school with brand new facilities like within the last 2 years, and they're going to build another one on the other side of town because there's so many kids, and that one's already at capacity. So that's kind of where we're at, is like there's going to be a ton of kids everywhere. So the other advantage we're looking at is a slightly smaller school that gives us more individualized attention.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to actually ask about next, because there are cost implications to this, and especially right now, this versus daycare because of the age of your kids. We'll get into that, but so in theory, right, private schools are going to have slightly better education because it's more detailed, more focused, smaller classroom sizes, right, better funding. So in theory, they're going to have a better, education, set of classes, all that. But I think this is just a personal thing in my head. To me, like public school is like the real world, and private school is like a bubble, right? And maybe I'm actually way off with that.
That's the concern.
For me, I'm like, they're not exposed to different walks of life, different people of different socioeconomic backgrounds and different ethnicities, and they are never getting exposure to, I don't know, what I would deem as the real world. I don't know if that's stupid or not, but like private school is so like insular. It's a bubble.
Yeah, it's very insulated.
Right. And I don't know that would be as good for my kids, but that's just my thoughts on that. Do you have any concern about that as you kind of make this decision?
I do. Yeah, that's a big concern for me. So when I was going to even my public school, right, I was half of 1.5 African Americans in my entire school, right? So there were literally 1.5 kids who identified as something other than Native American or Caucasian, and wow. I was half of that, right? So for me, and even my kids, you look at them, and even though I am half African American, you look at my children, my son has blonde hair and blue eyes. My daughter has platinum blonde hair and brown eyes. For all intents and purposes, they are Caucasian children. Right. Even though they're Italian, German, African, Irish, and a bunch of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I am concerned about not having them exposed in the place where they are always in, right, to other walks of life, other cultures, other kids, even other foods. Now, I think we mitigate that as parents. That's still our responsibility to go to festivals, to expose them to things, to go to things that are outside our comfort zone so they can see them. And I think that's a good experience for all of us. And it's part of our, sort of travel plans as well. But I am concerned that it does feel insulated and like they would be in a bubble and probably exposed to a lot of other kids who are upper middle class, who have the means and ability to go to a private school, who have parents who took the time to send them to that private school. It's going to be a very different experience because I'm a public school kid. My wife is a public school kid.
Yeah.
Everybody we know are pretty much public school kids.
I don't know why I feel like this, but I just have like this opposition to private schools. I don't know why I'm like that. Now, if you're a guy who's watching this,
did you go to one?
No, I didn't. And I don't know. Maybe I watched too much Gossip Girl. I'm like, they're all doing fentanyl. They're horrible. No, I don't know. Like that.
Well, the school only goes through 8th grade, so I hope
there you go. There. Listen, if and then they finish 8th grade and they go to high school, and it's like, this is very different than, I don't know. Like, is that
That's
weird?
That's going to be a big shock. That would be a big shock.
So, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're listening to this on wherever you get your podcast, and you did go to private school, like, what are you talking about? I had a great experience. My kids are going to do it too. Like, that's cool. I want to hear your thoughts on that, and this is also so dependent on geography, like where you are, what your school situation is, who you're around, right? And so, I mean, there's so many factors that play into this, and with where we are at, which actually sounds kind of like where Ben is in a similar spot, where it's a lot of new builds. We went from one high school to like 4 or 5, and it's a decent school district as well, where we actually feel comfortable about the level of education, the quality of it, where we're at. So if there's like, no, we would never do private school, or pay those costs. Those are my 2 cents. But again, you may be in a very different situation where like, no, private school is gonna have to be the way that we go, and we're gonna make that work. I know. Saunders, I haven't given you a chance to ask any questions for Ben or anything.
So I went to private school.
I went to private school. I knew you said that. I knew
so
you would
kindergarten
say
through 6th grade, with the exception of 4th grade, I was in private school, small Catholic college or Catholic elementary school. And then, so in 4th grade, we moved to Boston. And we went to public school when we got to Boston. And we went, at the time, Iowa was the #1 state for education. We went to like the number 30th state in education. We went from a private school to a public school. And I did not struggle, I don't think, as much as my sister did, but my sister lost her mind. She's like, these kids are all idiots. They can't do addition. We're in 3rd grade. Like, she could not handle the drastic step down from where she was in her private education, which, by the way, she wasn't the model student. Like, she was a terror.
Any listeners in Massachusetts, no dig at you guys. Utmost respect.
This was the 90s. Don't worry about it.
We don't need Southie coming after us.
Right. But we went, and she did not have a good experience, right? So we end up back in Iowa for a bunch of reasons, and back at the same school. And we were now behind where our peers were, and we were only gone for 12 months. And we both had to catch up, right? And then we left in 6th grade and went to Pennsylvania. And we had a similar experience, but not the same. So we went from private school to public school, and we were now ahead of our peers again, but we were not, the delta wasn't as large, for whatever reason.
What about the social element of it? There's the educational element. What about the social element? Did you feel like a drastic shift where you're like, damn, like these kids are bad? Like,
I was a Boy Scout.
Safety that I had. Oh, okay.
I was a Boy Scout on the way to becoming a Boy Scout early when I left the private school, and I was not a Boy Scout after a year in Boston, because that social environment was terrible and they were not nice. Like, I was the new kid. I was on the outside, and like, I was exiled from the Scouts, even by the troop leaders. Like, the adults were a problem. So,
that's so interesting. And that's what my fear is. Like when a kid's like, no one is nice, and now they're getting bullied, and they don't know how to deal with that adversity. That's my concern, right?
And that's one of the things that I think was traumatic for us as kids. We went from an environment where you were almost forced to be nice to one another. It was a Catholic elementary school, right? I mean, we were taught, be friends, be nice to your coat, like, and you will sit down and have these conversations and yada yada yada. And then we went to a public high school where it was Lord of the Flies. Like, the teachers were just barely hanging on. And again, when I went to Pennsylvania, it was similar, but not as drastic. And so that being said, I chose a private college out of high school. I went back to a private Catholic college for the first couple of years I went to college. Now, that being said,
was it called
in my late 20s, I knew how to dress. I knew what business casual was, what formal attire was. I had table manners. And these were all skills I had picked up somewhere in my early childhood, right? Through different events at the school. And I have friends who were at that point in their 30s, and they were like, I don't know the difference between business casual, casual, and formal. I don't know how to dress for those occasions. I have to look them up on the internet every time and then find something in my closet that fits, right? So I think, as bad as this sounds, if you intend to have your kids in that upper crust, if you will, right, there is a leg up by throwing them in private school where that stuff is instilled from a very young age. This is how you act. This is how you behave. These are the rules of society. Participate, right? Yep, it sucks. Yep, it sounds elitist, but it's hard to get those skills later, right?
Yeah, and that's my struggle, right? Is this idea that, you know, as a father, I want my kids to have the best and to do their best, right? And to have the most opportunity available to them. I think in some way it's to give them the things you never had, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But is it necessary to send them to private school to do that? No. And I don't really know. So, I mean, we're excited for our tour to see what it looks like, but it's still like, it feels so up in the air to be making what feels like a life altering decision of private school versus public school. But, you know, maybe we're putting too much weight on it as well.
What's funny is, for my kids, I'm in a situation where the public school, like, we live in a small town, right? The private school is a Catholic private school. The public school is a generic public school. Their class sizes are within 5 of each other.
Yeah.
The tuition. So Iowa has a cool voucher program, whereas if you make under 4 times the minimum wage or the minimum salary, which at this point is about 120K as a household. So if your household makes under 120K, you can take a voucher and you can send it to any college you want or school you want. So whether you go to public school or private school, you can do that. Most of the tuitions are at or near the voucher level. So I basically have the option, and the only issue I have is a wait list, right? And I don't know which way I'm going, because I think in a lot of ways you guys are right. I think I can instill the social values that I was raised with without going to private school.
Yeah.
But I'm not positive on that, right? And then I have questions about, like, I had a Catholic moral upbringing. Is that essential to make a good human? I don't know, right?
Man. Well, I'm curious about how your trip is going to go, and maybe we can revisit this because it's interesting. It's interesting. Is there cost implications? And I think you talked pre-show about, like, you know, the offset of, like, daycare versus the cost of the.
Yeah, not as expensive as daycare, but, you know, still an additional cost to the household.
Will they take both your kids? Can you, like, do they have like a private preschool?
Yeah, I thought they did. They don't. But here's the other added bonus: the private school is literally 3 minutes down the street from our current daycare, which we love.
Wow, dude!
Wildly convenient to drop one off, go down the street, drop the next one off, and I can still go to work.
So effectively, your household layout isn't changing because you're just continuing daycare to private school.
Right.
The only financial benefit is you wouldn't have to necessarily be putting that outlet. You'd just be driving 40 minutes out of the way.
I half the cost of my daycare. I half the cost of one kid's daycare, and then am more conveniently located to my work. Which it's honestly, that's a big driving factor for lack of a better term. It's a big driving factor for why we're looking at it.
In the school, right? Because you're not going to split them up. Once both kids are in, is it still a financial savings?
Yes, still half the cost of daycare.
So that almost is a no-brainer in the sense that you save on time and money that you currently don't have.
One interesting thing that sticks out at me is we are, for Henry to play, like, club soccer, which is kind of like a unique whatever, it's like absurdly expensive. It was like $400 just to get his, like, uniform and the kit and the bat and the backpack and the ball and all that stuff. And then there's, like, always all these ongoing costs for each season, in addition to a monthly cost for the coaching and all that. But I'm curious, like, if it's a year-long school and they have, like, sports programs like soccer or football or basketball, are they, like, kind of practicing and training all year long, and you don't they don't have sports programs? That's the other downside. That would have been so cool if they had that, and you were like,
so there's because it's a small school, there is no athletic program. So if he wanted to do anything else, it would have to be outside of that, which again might be a challenge with a year-round school schedule.
Gotcha.
So we'd have to figure that one out. That would be an extra potential cost. But
yeah, but
you know,
I think there's an upside there, right? In the sense that your kid's social circle would be almost doubled, right? With a standard public school, your social circle is who you're playing sports with, or your kids are doing what their friends are doing
with.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you send them to school here and they do sports over here, and now their social circle is literally doubled, right? Their exposure is doubled.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which may or may not be a positive logistically.
Well, private school, public school, enlightening conversation. If you guys have any experiences with this, would love to hear your thoughts. Now, if you can't afford private school, you can definitely afford a trip to huckberry.com. You like that? You like that?
Excellent
segue.
segue.
Wow. Kirk Cousins, you like that? It's they're serving up fresh fits for dads of all shapes and sizes. Got the EDC stuff. Got fresh glasses. Got hats. Got shorts that I'm actually wearing right now.
I like how you guys always leave out the kitchen gear. They have amazing kitchen gear,
like
and coffee gear.
gear.
It's like their household stuff is
that's
really
not
cool.
the front of mind stuff, but you're right. They do have that stuff. If you want to go ahead and check it out, we're going to have that link below. Saunders is absolutely right. They do have good
really
gear
good
outside
home
of
gear.
just clothes as well. So we got holiday gifting coming up. You definitely want to snag something for your buddies, other fellow dads out there. You can drop a hint to your wife, your spouse, your significant other, father-in-law. Got the grandpas out there, right? Hook them up with some fresh swag and kitchen attire. Did I say attire? Kitchen swag, whatever.
Household accoutrement.
Oh,
private school education. Household accoutrement.
So good. We're gonna have that link to Huckberry in the show notes.
Just shaking his head. Like,
we're gonna have that link to the show notes wherever you listen to your podcast. We're gonna have that in the description on YouTube. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.